Noah asks, why does Grandpa still work? He doesn't have to, right? He has money from his pension thing. So why does he still go to his workshop all the time? No dialogue. Only William's work and the ambient sound of the workshop. Possibly a quiet voiceover begins. Nobody really knew why he kept working. But the answer to that question would change everything. Thomas speaks directly. Your grandfather's father left when he was 12. Just walked out. Your grandfather's mother worked factory jobs. Double shifts sometimes, and your grandfather, he was the oldest. He had younger siblings. He understood pretty early that there was going to be a hole in the family that someone had to fill. William explaining to Noah, Michael listening. The sound of 3 generations acknowledging each other, no dialogue, only the sound of writing. Perhaps a voiceover captures the beginning of the note. Dear Grandpa, thank you for working so hard for my dad. And thank you for working hard for me. 11-year-old Noah asked his father a question that should have been simple. Why does Grandpa still work? Michael Patterson froze. He was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing spreadsheets on his laptop, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. Noah had wandered in after school, backpack still slung over one shoulder, still wearing his soccer cleats. Why does he still work? Michael repeated, as if the question didn't quite translate. Yeah, Grandpa's like 70, right? He doesn't have to work anymore. So why does he go to his workshop every Saturday, and sometimes on weeknights, too? Michael closed his laptop. He genuinely didn't have an answer. This was the moment, though Michael wouldn't recognize it until much later, when everything started to change. William Patterson was indeed 70, and he was technically retired. He'd spent 35 years as a supervisor at a manufacturing facility just outside Columbus. He'd drawn a pension for 5 years now. He owned his house outright. He didn't need money. Yet every Saturday morning, without fail, William was in his workshop. The workshop was a converted garage at the back of his property, a modest house in Worthington, Ohio, in a neighborhood of modest houses owned by modest people who'd worked modest jobs and lived modest lives. The workshop was William's kingdom. It smelled like sawdust and metal, and the ghost of 40 years of projects. The walls held pegboards of carefully arranged tools. A workbench ran the length of one wall, scarred and stained and perfect. On Saturday mornings, William had work waiting. A loose railing on Mrs. Chen's deck. A cabinet door that wouldn't close on the Johnsons' kitchen. A fence gate that needed hanging. Small jobs. Jobs he did affordably, sometimes for free if someone was struggling. Jobs that needed doing. Michael had grown up watching his grandfather work. He had memories of being 10 years old, sitting on a stool in this same workshop, supposedly helping but mostly just watching William's hands move with purpose. He remembered the smell. He remembered William's quiet focus. He'd never questioned it. He'd simply assumed that his grandfather liked staying busy. Some people were wired that way. William seemed happy in his workshop. That was enough. But now, sitting at his kitchen table, looking at his son's face as Noah waited for an answer, Michael realized he didn't actually know why his grandfather worked so much. He'd never asked. I'm not sure, Michael said carefully. Maybe he just likes it. But he doesn't need to work, Noah pressed. He has money from his pension thing. So why does he still do it? Some people like feeling useful, Michael offered. It sounded hollow even as he said it. That night, Michael lay in bed next to his wife, Sarah, who was already asleep. He stared at the ceiling and thought about his grandfather. About Saturday mornings. About a question from an 11-year-old that should have been easy to answer, but wasn't. He reached for his phone and called his father. Thomas Patterson at Orange on the third ring. It was 10:47 p.m. Dad, hi. Sorry, I know it's late. Everything okay? His father's voice was alert immediately. Bad news called after 10. Yeah, everything's fine. Noah asked me something today and I realized I don't actually know the answer. He asked why Grandpa still works so much, why he won't just retire and relax. There was a pause. What did you tell him? His father asked. I told him Grandpa likes feeling useful, but I don't think that's actually the answer. I don't think I know the answer. Another pause. Michael could almost hear his father deciding whether to speak. That's probably a conversation you should have with your grandfather, Thomas said finally. Dad, or with me, I guess. But I want to be honest with you, it's your grandfather's story to tell. I don't want to rob him of that. Michael felt frustration building. I'm an adult. I can handle the real answer. Noah deserves to understand our family better. And I should understand it too. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Can you come over tomorrow evening? His father said. Sarah and the kids can come, or just you. Either way, I think it's time you knew. Michael went alone. Sarah understood without asking. She could read the tone in his voice. Something important was about to happen. His father's house was the house Michael had grown up in. His father had moved back there 5 years after his mother died, preferring the familiar to the new. The kitchen still had the same yellow walls. The living room still had the same worn furniture. Thomas was sitting in his favorite chair when Michael arrived. He looked old in a way Michael hadn't consciously registered before. The lines around his eyes were deeper. His hands were spotted with age. He was 68, but Michael suddenly saw him as truly old. Your grandfather's father left when your grandfather was 12. Thomas began without preamble. Just walked out. Your grandfather's mother worked factory jobs, double shifts sometimes. Your grandfather, he was the oldest. He had younger siblings. He watched his mother come home exhausted. He understood pretty early that his father wasn't coming back, and that there was going to be a hole in the family that someone had to fill. Michael sat down slowly. So when your grandfather was old enough to work, he did. He was 16. He got a job at the same factory as his mother. And he made himself a promise. If he ever had children, they would never experience what he experienced. They would never wonder where their father was. They would never see their mother broken by abandonment. They would never have to choose between eating and getting an education. Thomas looked at his son. He kept that promise, Michael. For 52 years, he kept it. He worked overtime. He took second jobs. Your grandmother worked too, but your grandfather, he worked like he was trying to build a fortress around his children with his bare hands. He skipped vacations. He turned down a promotion once because it would have meant moving, and he didn't want his family scattered. He put all 3 of his children through college, paid for it himself, every semester, every book, every tuition bill. Michael felt something tightening in his chest. Your Uncle David, he's a doctor. Your Aunt Catherine, she's a lawyer, and I became a teacher. None of us had to take out loans. None of us had to work our way through school the way your grandfather did. We had choices. We had time to study and learn and become people. And every one of those choices, every hour of free time we had, was because your grandfather decided that his father's abandonment would not define our family. Thomas leaned forward. Now your grandfather is 70. He has his pension. He has his house paid for. But he still works because working is who he is. Because stopping would feel like giving up. Because the habit of sacrifice is so deep in him that he doesn't know how to be any other way. And maybe, I think maybe, because he still doesn't feel like he's done. Like there's always one more person to take care of, one more railing to fix, one more thing to do. Michael sat in the silence of his childhood home and felt something inside him reorganize. I never knew, he said quietly. I know, his father said. Your grandfather never wanted recognition for it. That was his way, silent sacrifice. He didn't want anyone making a fuss. He just wanted his children to have better lives. But Michael, you need to understand something. Your entire life is built on what your grandfather chose to do. Your college education, your opportunities, your career. The fact that you got to have a childhood instead of having to work, that's because your grandfather worked so hard to make it possible. Michael thought about his apartment in high school, how his mother had packed lunches and his father had been at his soccer games, how he'd never had to work during high school or college, how he'd never wondered if there was enough money, how he'd gotten to become who he wanted to become. Why didn't anyone tell me this before, he asked. Because your grandfather wouldn't have wanted us to. He would have said it was maudlin. He would have said he was just doing his job, and maybe that's true. But I think I made a mistake, Michael. I think I should have told you. Because you're a father now, and you should know what it means to sacrifice for your children. You should understand what your son is inheriting. Michael went home and didn't sleep. He went through old photographs instead. He found one of his grandfather from the 1980s, William in his work clothes, strong and focused, at a job site. Michael had never really seen that photograph before. He'd looked at it dozens of times, but he'd never actually seen it. He saw a man working to build a world where his children could be safe. Saturday morning, Michael told Sarah he was taking Noah to visit his grandfather. Sarah smiled like she understood something Michael hadn't fully articulated yet. The workshop was exactly as Michael remembered it. William was working on a bookshelf, sanding a piece of wood with careful, practiced motions. He looked up as they came in. Well, this is a surprise. Hi there, buddy. William's face opened when he saw Noah. He set down his sandpaper and wiped his hands on a cloth. Grandpa, can we ask you something? Noah said. William looked at Michael over Noah's head. Something in his expression shifted, a subtle recognition that this moment mattered. Of course, William said. What's on your mind? Noah glanced back at his father. Michael nodded. Why do you work so much? Noah asked. I mean, you don't have to work anymore, right? So why do you still come out here all the time? William was quiet. He set the cloth down carefully. He looked at his hands for a moment. Old hands, scarred from years of work, still capable. Come here, he said finally. He led Noah over to a shelf on the wall. There were photographs there. William as a young man. William's wedding. William with 3 small children. photos of different houses, different cars, different eras. "When I was a boy," William said slowly, "my father left, just walked out one day. My mother worked to keep us alive, but there was a hole in our family where a father should have been. And I made myself a promise. If I ever had children, I would be the opposite. I would be present. I would work to give them chances I never had." Noah was listening with the intensity of a child who understands something important is being said. "So I worked. I worked a lot, actually. I worked so your father could go to college. I worked so he could become someone he wanted to be, instead of becoming someone he had to be just to survive. And all of that, all of those choices I made, they mattered for you too. Because your father had chances, and those chances let him become who he is. And now you have chances because of that." William looked at his grandson. "I still work because working is how I love people. And because I'm not done yet. There's always someone who needs help. There's always something that needs fixing. And your father is doing the same thing now. He works hard so that you can have opportunities, so that you don't have to worry about survival, so that you can just be a kid and figure out who you want to become." Noah looked like something was clicking into place inside him. "So you work because it's like a family thing," he said. "Yes," William said simply. "It's a family thing." That night, Noah sat at his desk and wrote something on a piece of lined paper. His handwriting was careful, the deliberate penmanship of an 11-year-old who knows something important is being expressed. "Dear Grandpa, thank you for working so hard for my dad. And thank you for working hard for me, even though I didn't know it. I understand now that you made choices so that I could have good things. That's really nice of you. I want you to know that I see it now. I see you. And I'm proud of you. Love, Noah." He put the note in an envelope and sealed it. The next Saturday, when William was in his workshop, and Michael and Noah delivered it together. William read it slowly. Michael watched his father's face, the slight trembling of the paper in his hands. Then William set the note down on his workbench, and tears rolled down his weathered face. "I didn't do it for this," he said quietly. "I didn't work all those years waiting to be thanked." "I know," Michael said, "but maybe it's okay to be seen. Maybe it's okay to let the people you sacrificed for understand what you did." William nodded. He looked at Noah, and then at his son Michael, and for the first time in all his years of quiet sacrifice, his labor was named, recognized, honored. Noah moved closer to his grandfather and hugged him. The unself-conscious hug of a child who now understood that his simple, safe life was built on love. The three of them stood together in the workshop. A grandfather who'd made a promise to be different than his own father. A father who was just beginning to understand the weight and gift of inheritance. And a boy who would never take his life for granted in the same way. Michael left the workshop that day changed. He understood now that being a father wasn't about grand gestures, it was about showing up. It was about the 1,000 small choices to prioritize your children's future over your own comfort. It was about working even when no one was watching. He called his own boss on Monday and renegotiated his schedule. He reduced his hours slightly, not dramatically, but enough. He told himself he was being practical, but he knew the truth. He was making the same choice his grandfather had made. He was choosing presence. He was choosing to be the kind of father who showed up. When Noah got home from school that day, Michael closed his laptop and said, "Want to help me with something in the garage?" Noah's face lit up. They didn't accomplish much. They cleaned the gutters and organized some tools. It was simple work. But Noah stood next to his father, and Michael stood next to his son, and the invisible chain of love and sacrifice that connected 3 generations became a little more visible. That night, Michael called his father. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "You're welcome," Thomas replied. "I'm going to tell Noah more, about all of this, about our family. I don't want him to inherit the silence." "Good," his "that's right" said. In his workshop, William was hanging a picture frame for a neighbor. His hands moved with the same careful precision they always had. He didn't know that his grandson now understood. He didn't know that his sacrifice had finally been seen, but he would find out, and that would be enough.